The Brooklyn Nets and Kevin Durant are going to be just fine, and in fact they are still my pick to win the Eastern Conference this upcoming season. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's talk about why. So obviously when you're talking about the Brooklyn Nets, you're mainly talking about that duo of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. And while they're obviously both extremely talented, both being multiple-time All-Stars, many people have expressed concerns about this duo. One of the main concerns that people have with this duo is their chemistry and any potential locker room issues that the two of them may cause. However, contrary to popular belief, I do not think Kyrie Irving is a locker room cancer, nor was he the sole reason that the Boston Celtics fell apart in 2018-2019, nor do I think Kevin Durant is as mentally weak as some people call him. And in terms of chemistry, I actually think this team is going to have great chemistry. And I say that because even though Kyrie and KD are viewed as potential locker room issues for being, to put it bluntly, kind of weird, that's something that they share in common together, and that's something that has allowed them to develop chemistry among themselves. So I think the duo of Kyrie and KD will have great chemistry together. And then obviously they have DeAndre Jordan on the roster, who I think is going to start next season, and they're basically best friends with him as well, so he'll fit right into that team. And I also think the team in general is filled with players who understand their roles. Take a look at Joe Harris. Harris knows that he is there to make threes. That is his role, and to me, he seems perfectly fine in that role. He has a job to do, he does it well, and he doesn't overcomplicate things. And I think the same can be said for a lot of other players on that roster, including Spencer Dinwiddie and Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince. Now, the exception to that could be Karis LeVert, and I could see LeVert not fitting in great with the team, and in fact, I think there's potential for LeVert to be traded at some point during the season, but I don't think LeVert will cause any major noticeable issues, so I think they'll be fine in terms of chemistry. Oh, and in terms of the coach, I think Steve Nash is going to be great. I think he's going to be similar to like Steve Kerr, where he's more of a player's coach, so he's there to basically keep things organized, keep good morale among the team, and provide some input when need be. So yeah, despite what many people think, I believe the Nets will be completely fine in terms of chemistry. And the next thing we have to look at is the on-court fit of this team. Now, once again, starting off with the two star players in Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, one may argue that they are too similar to work out together, but I actually think that that's going to complement really well together. I think that yes, it will be a very isolation-based offense, and that could come back to bite them at some point, but it's okay to have a heavy isolation-based offense when you have two of the top 5 isolation players in the league on your team. And similar to what I was saying before, I feel like Kyrie and KD have a kind of inexplicable connection together. I feel like they just sync well together. I don't really know how to explain it, but I just feel like they fit great together and they'll play off each other very well on the court. And I think it'll be somewhat similar to how Kyrie was with LeBron, where he's not the primary scorer, but he is a primary scorer, and he understands that he's not that guy, but he's still able to get his without fail. And looking beyond those two at the rest of the roster, I think they have some pretty underrated depth, and I think the pieces fit pretty well together, although there are a couple concerns that I will get to later. So looking at the Nets projected lineup, and this is the projected lineup according to ESPN, they will be starting Kyrie, LeVert, Joe Harris at the 3, and then KD at the 4, as well as DeAndre Jordan. And then looking at the bench, you have Spencer Dinwiddie, Bruce Brown, who I always want to call Bruce Bowen, Landry Shamet, another piece they just picked up, as well as Taurean Prince and Jarrett Allen returning. And then beyond that, I don't know how many minutes the rest of these guys will get. I do think TLC and Jeff Green will get solid minutes. I can't say too much for the rest of them, but we'll have to see. I think they're all solid pieces. And so looking at this team, what do you see? You see a lot of players, like I was saying before, who have a very specific role to play and are very good at that role. You have a lot of off-ball players like Joe Harris, like Taurean Prince, and like Landry Shamet. And then you have your more traditional paint-oriented big men in DeAndre Jordan and Jarrett Allen, which I think will fit pretty well considering this team has pretty good spacing everywhere else. You don't really need a stretch 5 there, even though it would be nice. And then at the backup guard positions, you have Spencer Dinwiddie and Bruce Brown, who I think are two players that are trying to fix the main two issues that the depth of this team has. And those two issues are lack of playmaking outside of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, and a general lack of perimeter defense. Now, the playmaking is the lesser of the two concerns, as like I said, it will be a heavy isolation-based offense and they have a lot of good scorers. But it still is a concern, as outside of Kyrie and Kevin Durant, who, by the way, I think are two very underrated playmakers. If you look at specifically Kevin Durant, how he has improved his playmaking throughout the years, I think he was averaging like 2.5 maybe at the start of his career. He then bumped it up to like 4 to 5 by the end of his time in OKC, and I think around like 2011 or 2012 is when you really see him start to take that leap. And then that only improved even more in Golden State, as in his last season in Golden State, he was averaging nearly 6 assists, which is a career high. So I think Kevin Durant is an underrated playmaker, and I also think Kyrie Irving is an underrated playmaker, and you don't see Kyrie's playmaking as much in the stats as he doesn't have great assist totals. But I think in terms of just, if you watch him play, you can tell that it's kind of an on and off thing for him. If he wants to be a great playmaker, he is a great playmaker. It's just a question of if he wants to be or not. But looking outside of those two, you don't have a whole ton of playmaking on this team. LeVert is more of just a pure shot creator than a playmaker, and Spencer Dinwiddie is really that only other guy that you can say is a solidified playmaker. And even then, he's not an incredible one, but he is very solid, and he's going to have to be the main guy off the bench in that department. But the more serious issue, and I think the more glaring issue if you're just looking at the names on this roster, is a real lack of perimeter defense. Just looking at that first three, Kyrie Irving, Caris LeVert, Joe Harris. Obviously, none of them are known as defenders, but similar to the playmaking thing with Kyrie, I think he's not a good defender, but he's at least an average defender if he wants to put the effort in. But yeah, it's really not a great defensive team on the perimeter, and that is why they brought in Bruce Brown from Detroit. I can't say I watch a ton of Pistons games, but from the little I've seen and what I've heard, he is a great perimeter defender, and that's really his role here. You also will have the option of putting Kevin Durant on the perimeter, even though it will be tough having Joe Harris at the 4 defensively. But with the way the league is moving, I think you can sometimes hide Harris at the 4 as you see more traditional 3s playing a small ball 4, and that's pretty much the standard at this point. You don't see a lot of traditional 4s anymore. So I think Durant will handle the main wing assignment, whoever the better player is between the 3 or the 4. Or potentially if you're going against a team with a great shooting guard, say the Wizards or the Rockets, you can have Kevin Durant guard that 2 guard, and then you can slide everybody else down, putting Caris LeVert on the 3 and trying to put Joe Harris on the 4. Maybe in games like that, you'll have to start Taurean Prince over Joe Harris, or maybe over Caris LeVert. I'm not really too sure. But yeah, if you're looking for a real weakness in this team, that is it. It is the perimeter defense. Now, we can analyze this team all we want, but I think really we all know that the success of this team is going to come down to one overarching question that nobody really knows the answer to. And that question is in the thumbnail, and that question is, will Kevin Durant be fully healthy? And again, nobody really knows. It's very unpredictable. If you're looking at the past, players have never really recovered from a torn Achilles, apart from the exception of Dominique Wilkins. But as modern medicine progresses, I think it's more likely to recover now than it ever had been before. And I'm not saying he's going to come back 100%. That's not going to be the case, but I think he can, throughout the regular season, slowly work his way back up to the player that he was before. And especially because a lot of the players who had their careers pretty much ended by a torn Achilles relied heavily on athleticism. For example, you look at DeMarcus Cousins and you look at Derrick Rose, and to an extent Kobe Bryant, even though he did rely less on athleticism towards the end of his career. But Kevin Durant, more than anyone else on that list, is less reliant on athleticism. His game has really never been the I'm gonna work you down, I'm gonna blow by you, and I'm gonna try to dunk on you type. It's a lot more reliant on just pure practice, skill, and natural talent. As everyone knows, Kevin Durant is probably the greatest shot creator and pure shooter we've ever seen in that position. And if he's not the greatest, if you want to say somebody like Larry Bird, or even if you want to try to argue LeBron James, he's at least in that top 5 realm. So it's very hard hard to tell with this type of injury. Obviously, nobody really knows, but if I had to put money on it, I would say that he will make a good recovery. Not a perfect recovery, but he will get maybe to like 95% of what he was before. And that is still a top 3 player in the league, in my opinion. At bare minimum, he's going to be top 10 when he comes back. He has a chance to still be the best player in the world, and I think he'll probably be around the 5th best player in the league when he eventually recovers. So I do think that Kevin Durant is going to be fine, and for that reason I think the Nets are going to be fine too. I don't foresee them being the top seed in the Eastern Conference. I think they'll take things a little bit slower in the regular season. I'd probably see them being around the 3rd or 4th seed, but in the playoffs they are still my pick to come out of the East because they have that championship experience with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They have the sort of players you want to go to in clutch time in the playoffs, and as great as Giannis is, he's obviously not as successful in the playoffs, and I don't think there's anybody that really compares to Kevin Durant in terms of players you'd want to lead your team in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. So despite the couple question marks I talked about with the perimeter defense, with the somewhat lack of playmaking, and obviously with Kevin Durant's injury, I do think that the Nets are still the best overall team in the Eastern Conference when you're specifically looking at for the playoffs, and I do think that they will be as good as they were hyped up to be, or what they were expected to be when they made the signings of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So make sure to subscribe and turn notifications on, as well as follow my Twitter to stay updated on when I will be posting more videos. I have a few ideas in the works, but I'm trying to take a little bit of a step back so I don't get burnt out and I'm able to be more consistent with uploading. And if you've watched to this point in the video, I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.